keys, by the way. All right, a little bit of wabi-sabi there. Apparently the live stream was playing on my laptop. Sorry about that, everybody. But hey, I made a nice sexy intro for you, and we're continuing to rock the house here with this special 3-camera angle extravaganza. And so much work has gone into doing this, and I want to thank all of you for making it possible. You are the reason why I'm here, and I am very grateful for your continued support. We've been checking the number of YouTube videos that have my name in the title, and believe it or not, in the last few days, it's been nearly 6 million different videos on YouTube that have my name in them. And we're going to be talking about that. And incidentally, to show you how significant that is, right now the number of videos with the name Hillary Clinton in them, 3.1 million. So we're almost double the number of actual videos where people either love you or hate you or whatever, but they put that name into the title of a video and they upload it to YouTube. So I don't know why it took me so long to do something like this. I've been working on this live setup for many years, but anyway, let's rock and roll. There's so much to talk about in this particular subject of ascension through the ages, and it's particularly poignant right now in light of the current events that are going on. I've been talking extensively about this alliance that seems to be working to help us out on the global level to stop some of the most egregious crimes that are happening on the world stage today. This is something that's come to me through briefings. This is something that's come to me through meeting people in person who actually work within this alliance. It is not a conspiracy theory, it is a fact. And there is a long trail of evidence going way the heck back showing how long this thing has been at work. So I just want to be clear in saying that my work focuses my work focuses on lots of different things, and if you've come to this work through my material on the Alliance and then you're saying, well, okay, David's talking about people being arrested and he's talking about tribunals. How does this relate to the idea of ascension? And I believe the two are fundamentally interconnected. And I want to try to establish some of why that is. So, first of all, with the topic of ascension, this was a very strange thing that was coming to me from dreams ever since I was very, very young. 2 years old and up is when I start to have dreams where I'm seeing some sort of flying craft hovering over the ground. It was like it was wobbling. And this was some kind of cylinder, but it didn't have wings. And then I also had experiences with a person inside that container where he looked like Obi-Wan Kenobi. Sorry, everybody's moving in the background. It's very distracting. I'm not that good. If people are in my eye line, it does break the flow a little bit. Okay, we're doing some lighting adjustments here. Thank you, so we don't get that glare on my face. Anyway, Obi-Wan Kenobi, after I saw Star Wars in 1977, that's who this old man became when I'd have these dreams. And he was telling me that there was going to be something very phenomenal that would happen to the whole planet as we go through this mass evolutionary event. And I have been led to believe this all my life. The man was telling me I was going to become a very famous spiritual figure. Actually, ever since about 2 years old is when I remember having these dreams. And it was also interesting, my father was writing about rock and roll for the local papers, and so whenever anybody would come into the Albany, Schenectady area of upstate New York, we would end up meeting them backstage. So I got to meet many of the top rock and roll bands of the late 1970s and 1980s. I was put on a motorcycle at the Grateful Dead concert as an example. I believe I met Jerry Garcia. I don't remember, I was too young. But I definitely remember meeting Mickey Hart, and he was the drummer from the Grateful Dead. I've met so many of these types of people. It was an interesting thing to meet them and realize that they're ordinary people like you. They're not anybody special. They're just an ordinary person having an extraordinary experience. And I believe that part of why I had that all happen to me was to understand that, first of all, being a public figure is not what it's cracked up to be. Almost everybody I met backstage, they were very unhappy, and they were basically prisoners of the tour bus. So I've tried to do the career my own way. I don't want to spend a lot of time on the road. It's obviously better for me to do something like this at home than to have to travel to various locations around the planet in order to do that. And that really does help, because I'll tell you what, when you saw these guys and you got to talk to them and they're living on a tour bus, it was a rough existence for them. So let's bring up another cosmic background for you guys to on our slides here. This is a really good illustration of the geometric nature of the universe. It's a plexus thing, but I like the idea of what it shows you. So anyway, Ascension is a very interesting topic. And it's something that has been near and dear to my heart for a long time. We are learning a lot about the universe. We are learning that there is a geometric underpinning, as I said in the previous broadcast, and there's so much we can talk about with that. If you remember, I was discussing the work of two scientists from Caltech, Nima Arkani-Hamed and Yaroslav Trunka, who actually showed that all the squiggles in the quantum realm appear to be emanations from a single object. And the object is fundamentally built off of a tetrahedron, and they have a different view of how it works than I do, but the point is, it is all tetrahedral. So this concept of the tetrahedron being a Merkaba, as it appeared in, for example, ancient Tibetan artwork, it is the Hebrew Star of David, it is the Masonic square and compass, and though the Masonic symbol is now often associated with negative things, I believe with this, as with many other things, that the initial intention of the material that was brought through to us was positive. The G representing God, the ruler representing what you draw the lines with, and the compass representing what you draw the circles with. It is essentially talking about sacred geometry, and it appears that whoever did this, whoever gave this to us, was some sort of extraterrestrial consciousness trying to give us a clue as to the real intrinsic nature of reality. So once you get down to that geometric model, you're dispensing with a lot of mainstream false ideas about particles, because we're no longer dealing in a particle framework. This is very important. When we look at the geometry of the nucleus, and I don't have slides for this right now, we do have some cool slides today, but Dr. Robert Moon, who was one of the people who worked on the nuclear bomb, actually, in the 1980s came up with a new model of the nucleus where he realized that the protons were actually corners of geometric patterns. And I've talked about this a lot in my various lectures. We're not going to get into this too much. Suffice it to say, I've done many hours about this stuff. It's in my books. It's in my television shows. We'll probably discuss it in this upcoming Ascension Mystery School class that I'm going to be doing. And the idea being that it's not a particle down there in the nucleus. It's actually a vibration because geometry is what we see when, for example, we take a drop of water with a little bit of sand in it. Normally that would look like a milky, cloudy liquid. But then when you vibrate it, for some strange reason, all the particles turn into sacred geometric patterns, including the tetrahedron. So what am I saying? Wow, that's a lot of stuff to take in. I'm saying that the actual shape, structure of the atomic nucleus appears to be a vibration at its core, not a particle. And then you have to say, well, what is it that's vibrating? There appears to be some sort of liquid-like substrate that actually is what's vibrating. There's some sort of essence to the universe that we don't actually get to see. We only get to see the crystals of it when it vibrates. And that's a whole lot of esoteric science that there's a lot of great research to back up. We're not going to really get into that too much here, but I do want to remind you also from the previous episode, the real crown jewel, I think, is the work of Dr. Luc Montagnier, where he showed us that you can take a drop of water, actually a little vial of water, and then you have another vial of water next to it that has some DNA in it. You vibrate both of them with a 7 hertz electrostatic field. Now, when we're taping Ancient Aliens, by the way, this is live, I can't do anything about this, but you're never supposed to let a plane go overhead while you're talking. You got to stop it, pause it, and wait for the darn thing to go by. But hey, this is live. There's no cuts, there's no re-edits. This is it. So if you heard that, then I guess that shows how good this microphone works. Anyway, wow. So like I'm used to having to stop when the plane goes by. Now I just bulldoze right through that thing. It's a little bit different doing it live, but I'm enjoying myself. I hope you are too. Is our comment section exploding in the live chat? Okay, well, that's that's to be expected. Thank you guys for helping us out so much. How the heck did we get up to 5.8 or 5.9 million different videos on YouTube? All you have to do is type in my name and then site:/youtube.com in a Google search window and you'll see it. It's crazy. And so let me just say this too, which is there are a lot of fraudulent channels out there. There is only one channel that is my authorized YouTube channel, and that is Divine Cosmos / David Wilcock Official. And you want to look for that little gray check mark. Now, I have done guest appearances on other channels, specifically Third Phase of the Moon, Edge of Wonder, Jimmy Church. We're hoping to do something with Secure Team 10. We've talked to him already, and we're waiting to get that going. But the point is, there's all these channels out there, and they have some funny name, and we have to keep getting them taken down because this is fraud. And I believe a lot of those 6 million videos are fraudulently uploaded, which suggests, okay, somebody is doing this on a bulk level. YouTube actually just made it a lot easier to upload videos in bulk, which I'm very disappointed about, actually. So the point is, support the truth, support the real channel, become a subscriber. I know everybody says this, it's so cliche, but you do have to do this. You have to subscribe, and you have to click on the notification bell, because if you don't, we see extensive evidence that you're just not going to see a new video. We're getting drowned by fake content, which appears to be done deliberately to try to make it impossible for you to hear from me. So let's just get that subscription, get that bell clicked. That way, when I actually do something like this, you'll know about it. All right, enough of that dirty business. I just feel all kind of, see if I can make my wife laugh, that's good, you know.
You're doing great, nobody hears the airplane.
Nobody heard the airplane?
That's what they're saying.
Okay. It makes me feel dirty, you know, talking about the teddy bear. That's what we called him. We knew who this guy was, by the way. He was organizing a massive crime ring. We knew who he was. We knew his name. We had people who were wanting to be whistleblowers who had been with him, women who'd been with him. He was a con man. He was a liar. He was a fraud. And there was even a suggestion that he was involved in some very dark stuff involving sexual films, and I'll not go any further than that. So this guy's been a real pain in the butt. It appears that he's hired a whole bunch of people in Southeast Asia to upload these videos. It appears this guy probably got arrested, but now his teams are doing it on their own. And we very likely believe, as she just whispered to me, it probably was that he was employed by the cabal. We had intel saying that too. but a few of my friends knew who he was. I just don't want to go forward. I don't attack people in public, no matter how badly they're attacking me. I have a very strict policy. There was one time years ago, and this is a true story, where I was involved with somebody, zip, I'm going to go over there. It's a damn good thing I got tally lights, I'll tell you what. This is Metasets. It's a great tally light system. I get a red light when I know which camera's on. Anyway, years and years ago, somebody sent me an email, and they were really negative about a particular figure in this community, and wanted me to agree with it. And I didn't. I said, well, that's kind of mean-spirited, but yes, I do agree this person is not really coming from the right place. And I don't like it either, so I agree with you, at least to some degree. The next thing I know, like the next day, my entire email ended up on that person's website. They had trapped me, they had set me up, they sent me an email where they appeared to be hating on this person when they're actually one of their minions. See, now I'm giving everybody ideas, Elizabeth. Maybe I shouldn't be telling people this, but it went out there, and then you get all their followers coming after you, right? So this whole gang comes after you. It's really, really ridiculous. Anyway, we don't need to go through all this silly stuff. I just do want to point out, I really was disengaged from YouTube for a long time. I did maybe like one video a year. You could tell my channel was kind of abandoned. But because you guys wanted so much, you wanted that content, you fueled this demand that's led to 6 million videos with my name in the title. Now I actually want to get back in here and start doing something with this. Start giving you real stuff so you're not always having to dumpster dive with a bunch of old radio shows from 10 years ago that they retitle with a new date and some fake channel that kind of sounds like something I would make, but it's not. You're not going to see the gray check mark. There's not going to be very many subscribers. We are doing our best now that we're on a network to get content ID verification to try to get this stuff taken down, but it's a lot of work. So thank you for your help in flagging videos that are not authentic, because this really does help us a lot. Anyway, getting back to the subject of Ascension, Dr. Luc Montagnier, as I was saying, he's got this whole science where he takes the tube of water, before I was so rudely interrupted by that plane, that's got DNA in it, and another tube that's plain water. You wrap electrostatic coils around it, you run 7 hertz through it, which is the Schumann resonance, or the base frequency of the Earth, and lo and behold, what do you get? After 18 hours, the tube that only had plain water in it grows little DNA guys that you can actually see in a microscope. And I love it when people try to say that this is pseudoscience or this is ridiculous. Well, just because he won a Nobel Prize, that doesn't mean anything. Really? A Nobel Prize winning scientist is not good enough for you? It's only because we stick to our preconceived biases. We're not ready to take that leap, which is that the universe is built on the quantum level to make life. That something as simple as H2O, hydrogen and oxygen, the simplest compound you could ever imagine, is all the way out there making this stuff happen, turning into DNA, just from energy. It's unbelievable. And it suggests that the universe is all germy, right? There's DNA everywhere. There's stuff everywhere that's alive. I don't know. Maybe I don't want to go out into space after all. Well, the cool part is, though, that not only does life get made out of the quantum fields, but it appears that life can be evolved from the quantum fields. In other words, we have to really rethink the universe. We're used to seeing all these arcane equations and thinking that only through algebra are you going to solve these mysteries. If we redefine it, instead of something you need 5 PhDs to understand with all this arcane math, instead take it from the level where it is a living universe and there are very sophisticated, intelligent quantum fields that push water into becoming DNA. Literally reshaping alchemically the molecules. That's what this Nobel Prize winning scientist, Dr. Luc Montagnier, actually discovered, but it's a paradigm shift. We're not quite ready as a collective to embrace something that heavy. Because once the universe is conscious, I actually went ahead of it, right? I was going to say once the universe is alive, once Once the universe is alive, it's conscious. Why? Because DNA makes conscious beings. Therefore, if DNA is like a map for all the complexities and the little noodles in your brain, the DNA makes that brain, right? It has the information to make the brain. The brain then thinks. Consciousness becomes the substrate. Consciousness becomes the origin of the universe. There is something consciously directing that water to turn into DNA. It doesn't happen by some weird mathematical formula. It's an intelligence. And when you get into the deep meditative practices like the Tibetan Buddhists, who we're going to talk about today, what they're seeing is that the consciousness is available to you. You can access universal mind instantaneously. Now, how do you do that? There are two main principles the Tibetans talked about. You focus on awareness, and you focus on emptiness. It sounds simple enough, but it's actually very profound. What they would do, you're up there in the Himalayas, meditating in the mountains. You imagine that you are the mountains, that you're looking at this incredible view. You project your identity into that view. You see your consciousness as being those mountains, and that's your awareness. So you become aware of the awareness that is everything, that all is made from awareness. That's the meditation. And then you become aware that it's empty, that there is an underlying intrinsic emptiness in which there is no form, that all things emanate from. Now, what did we say before about these two guys from Caltech that hacked the mystery of quantum physics? It's all coming off a little Merkaba, the tiniest object and also the largest object in the universe. All matter, all form, comes from something that is ultimately just a shape, a vibration, intrinsically formless without space and time. It's a very, very trippy concept. And as I love to say when I'm at a conference, there's one guy in the back on 3 hits of acid and he knows exactly what I'm talking about. I get it, dude. Well, anyway, the point is, this awareness is empty and you can access it. And when we find people who give us inspiration, we're getting closer and closer to that awareness, that feeling of inspiration, that sense of being electrical, that sense of being in love. We just had Valentine's Day. There's something about that feeling of inspiration, that feeling of love, that feeling of excitement, that feeling of awe that is getting us really close to that original mind that we are. Because when these meditators would get to this state properly, invariably they are in an ecstatic bliss, which the Hindus would call nirvana. And there's various names for it in other cultures. The point is, you really, really feel great when you get reconnected with the universal mother light, as the Tibetans called it. And one of my great friends and colleagues, Danny Brinkley, is sort of the pioneer of the near-death experience, bringing it out in his book Saved by the Light, which is one of the biggest bestsellers you could ever imagine. It still sells very well. And he's talking about the afterlife experience. He's talking about what it means to have died clinically, no breathing, no heart rate, no brainwave activity, but yet you have this experience and you end up finding this light. That's a much more powerful version of what I'm talking about in an NDE, or near-death experience, than the meditative empty awareness concept. If you're meditating, you get really deep, you might get a taste of that, but really there's nothing quite like the near-death experience. Anyway, what we ultimately discover as Danny goes through this, and he's talked about how he had a very weird, vibrationally disarranged life. That's not even a word. I just made that word for you. Disarranged. Anyway, we could say dysregulated. Vibrationally dysregulated. That is a word. He went from this life that was very dysregulated, where he was actually doing some very nefarious stuff. He goes to the afterlife. He has this amazing awakening experience. And what does he realize? The same thing that many others have realized if they have this happen, which is, you are a spiritual being. You are here for a reason. There is an agenda for your life. You are not here just to try to get ahead before the whole S-house goes up in flames, right? That's the Jim Morrison quote, I just want to get my kicks before the whole thing goes up in flames. No, you're here to create value for other people. You're here to love. You're here to be growing spiritually. Now, another thing that becomes a very obvious iteration of this spiritual enlightenment that people get is the concept of reincarnation. Reincarnation is a very interesting idea which was supported in the early Christian teachings. In fact, one of the founding church fathers named Origen said that the greatest hidden secret of Christianity was reincarnation. And then, I forgot what?
I didn't say anything, I just said Shroud of Turin.
Shroud of Turin? No, that's way ahead from where we are now. No, I told you we're going to go for a while. And see, we got to do this as a team, right? And I need to have two other brains here. Anyway, Origen was talking about and that's actually where the term origin comes from, incidentally enough, except it's spelled with a G-E-N in this guy's name. He was talking about that the greatest hidden secret of Christianity, which came directly from one of the apostles to his teacher and then to him, was that Jesus was actually teaching reincarnation. So, there are a couple clues in that you can find in the Bible if you're interested in Christianity. And again, I try to do interfaith. I'm not pushing any one religion, but I like to look at these various faiths in terms of where did all this energy come from that makes millions of people, if not billions of people, believe in a supernatural force. Christianity, of course, has 38,830 different denominations. Think about that. Different actual sects of Christianity, 38,830. Clearly, it had a major effect. Was there an actual man, Jesus? It sure looks like it. And we're going to talk about that Shroud of Turin a little bit later on here. But I want to get to the underlying point, which is why do we have religion? We have religion because really cool guys or women show up and they do amazing things. They do things that blow our minds. They do things that expand our awareness, that make us feel that electrical inspiration that, as I said, is getting really close to the original mind of the universe. So when you have that mind gating into your consciousness, you will feel very inspired. And you look at these churches, you look at these mosques, you look at these temples, you look at these centers. They are built to try to inspire you with that sense of awe. You go in, you're looking around, you're looking at the ceiling, you're like, wow, look at all this great stuff. Look at these stained glass windows. Look at this, look at that. It's all part of creating the awe, the music, the incense. You know, a lot of incense has chemicals in it called sesquiterpenes, which actually activate your pineal gland and get your psychic senses going. So there's a whole science to this. It's very interesting, including the pyramids. And the original purpose of these pyramids was a chamber of initiation that actually raises your consciousness. So what I'm saying is that there appear to be supernatural beings out there in the universe. And the real interesting aspect of how this relates to reincarnation, first of all, Jesus was teaching reincarnation. And you can see this in a couple different places. There was a question asked to Jesus where people asked him, who has sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? This man sinned, so he was born blind? How could you have sinned, which just means transgress against universal law? How could you transgress against universal law and then be born blind? As if the people are saying, well, maybe the reason why he's blind is that he got in trouble in another lifetime and he had bad karma. Yes, that's exactly what it's saying. When Jesus showed up, there's this quote where they're saying, some people think he is Adam, some people think he's Elijah the prophet. He came back. He did it again. Well, the Catholic hierarchy didn't like that. They want to stuff that stuff down because that teaching gives you too much freedom. If you die, you're not going to burn in hell. You just come back and you do it again. You get to try again. And I've also looked at a very interesting website, Bible Reality Check, written by a Christian, where she, I believe it's a woman, it's just 2 initials as the first name, and that's a pretty big clue sometimes if a woman's trying to not be judged by being a woman, she's going to use initials. This was a common thing they did in the early 20th century, actually, authors of various types. And actually, James L. Tiptree Jr., who wrote Brightness Falls from the Dawn, James was a woman, and she changed her name to a man so that she'd be respected as a sci-fi author. I believe that's what the book was called. Anyway, I had a sci-fi class in college where we talked about this. Anyway, the Bible Reality Check website shows you that this concept of hell, the word that they use to translate as hell is Gehenna. Now, what was Gehenna? Gehenna was the garbage dump outside of town where they burned dead bodies so that they were no longer going to putrefy and infect people with dangerous viruses and diseases. So Gehenna is a fire of purification, a karmic fire. And then eon, or eternity, the word eon just means a cycle of time. So this idea of burn in hell for all eternity is a mistranslation of Gehenna and eon, which actually means go through a karmic purification for a cycle. And an eon could be the cycle of a person's life. An eon could be an hour, an eon could be a day, it could be a year. There's all different ways to use that word in its traditional usage. So we don't want to get stuck on this idea of eternal hellfire. That is a total mistranslation. But then it does have an interesting corollary, which is where this misunderstanding got originated, which is that there's this interesting eschatological or end-time discussion in the Bible. And this gets into the idea that there is going to be some sort of fire from the heavens, that there is going to be some sort of burning event. And I don't have that in my slides here, but there are a number of quotes from the New Testament that describe some sort of what we're now calling this solar flash event, in which it is compared to the biblical flood of Noah, it's compared to the fire and brimstone of Sodom and Gomorrah. Wait a minute. How could a loving, benevolent universe authorize this catastrophe? Why would a loving being like Jesus be talking about, like in the book of Matthew, that we will be separated like sheep from the goats? And of course, what does this do? This breeds fundamentalism. This very misappropriated idea from the book of Revelation that only 144,000 people are going through this process, right? Well, maybe it's us. There's 38,830 denominations of Christianity. Probably a lot of them have this end-time speculation going on, right? So we're not really stuck in thinking there's only 144,000 people. I'm not pushing that at all. It was only metaphorical. And there's some gematria, this science of biblical numbers, about the number 144 and what that number really means. That's what's key. It has nothing to do with the actual number of people. We don't know how many people are going to go through this, but that is the core of Ascension. That's the core of what I started to have this old man who looked like Obi-Wan Kenobi talking to me about all the way back when I was 2 years old, getting me to expect that something like this would happen within my lifetime, and that I would figure this stuff out and go forward with it. So we got to talk about reincarnation a little bit more here, because in my research I have made dramatic conclusions that reincarnation is real, and I direct you back to the work of Dr. Ian Stevenson, who researched some 3,000 children, mostly in the Middle East, who accurately remembered who they were in another lifetime. And in well over 1,000 of these cases, he was able to actually do the follow-up and find out that they remembered accurate details. They remembered the picture that was on the wall in the house. They remembered people's names. They remembered where they lived. They could take the researcher there. They knew the address. They knew the names of the people they lived with. In some cases, he even solved murders. And the weirdest thing of all was that their face actually would match who they remembered being before. It's not exactly the same. It's slightly different. But again, this shows that there is some deeper aspect to the way you look beyond the heredity of what you got from your parents. And it gets again into this interesting idea about DNA appearing in a drop of water, the idea that your facial features have some sort of energetic signature that impose upon your physical body to make you look more like this image of your deeper soul. So if you are reincarnating, let's just take that as a fundamental principle, which again, we could argue about that for hours. And at this point, it's too late to get mired in the argument. If people don't want to believe this, you can't make them, you can't force them, and that's okay. Don't fight them. But if you are hip enough to get to the idea that this is happening, and then see that the research is already there, Dr. Ian Stevenson, his heir apparent, Dr. Jim Tucker, where they've got forensic facial police matching software, where the face matches up with who you were in your previous life when you remember the details. Then the question becomes, okay, well, if you're not going to burn for all hell eternity, right, when you die, if you're not saved, or whatever it is, because remember, there's a lot of different religions that have variations of this, okay? If you just reincarnate and you're not stuck in some eternal hellfire, then what's the point? Why are we coming back over and over again? When you have that near-death experience, you get to a deeper intrinsic reality, which is that you have this higher self. That is the part of you that is dreaming, the part of you that is authoring your dreams. The higher self is telling you what to do. As much as possible, it's trying to steer your spiritual evolution. It does this through synchronicity. It does this through dreams. It does this through visions. It does this through hunches. Strange, you'll get an itching sensation. You'll have this pressure in your ears. Funny things like that happen, that once you start awakening, you'll be like, wow, why does this thing keep happening to me? Why am I seeing these numbers on the clock? Why am I having this experience? Why do I know who it is when the phone is ringing and I'm not looking at the caller ID? Why do I just happen to bump into this person who I know when I'm in the grocery store? I had no idea you were going to be here. Well, I didn't know you were going to be here, These things are not accidental. And what we're starting to learn more and more about from the secret space program side of the discussion is that we are surrounded by extraterrestrials. They're here right now. They're probably in the room with you right now as you're listening to me talk. You can't see them because they're slightly out of phase, but almost everyone who is on an awakening trajectory has these guardian angels. Now, the weird thing is that they do apparently have physical flesh and blood bodies. It took me a long time to figure this out. That they are actually physical beings who can be shot and killed, but when you feel them as a presence in the room, most likely that's because they're projecting out of body to be there with you. They might be somewhere else where they're more safe. They only approach you in a spiritual form, but they do have a corporeal body. So imagine how strange it is when you're dealing with people from the national security state and they start having these UFO crashes going on, and there's dead bodies inside these UFOs of people that look like us. But they're not us. They might be different. They might have different colored irises. Their ears might look a little different. Their nose might look a little different. They might be a little taller. They might be a little shorter. They might have a slightly different skin color, or maybe a radically different skin color. But they're still basically human. Then you go back through history, and what do you find out? That every ancient culture has reports of human-looking beings, but they're not quite like us. They levitate. They have these amazing teachings to give us. So that's one of the really cool things that we keep going into here, is that these beings have been here the whole time. They probably have time travel capability. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that. So when you look at something from the ancient past, don't think about it as 5,000 years old. Don't think about it as 700 years old. Think about it as beings that could just as easily be here now as they were there. And what are they doing? They're installing information about the times that we are in now. They programmed mythology with code to tell us something, to give us a prophecy about where we are today. And that is the basic idea of Ascension. That is what's so exciting about this. The idea that there is something deeper going on there, and that these beings were bringing that to our attention. Those beings also apparently are still talking to people in the national security state. There are benevolent beings that are doing their best to try to get through the military mindset, to try to say, look, you guys, would you please disclose? Would you please tell the public that we exist? And what do they want to do? They want to do spiritual education. They want to teach us about how to be more loving. They want to teach us about how to be better people. They're interested in finding a way for us to stop killing each other and saying, my God is better than your God. And don't you think that's a good thing? Nobody is saying that you have to give up your religion. But instead of acting as if there's only one right way, that is a reductionist view. What if there are different glorified beings who came here with this contact with intelligent infinity? And they gave us information that can liberate you. Because if you look at Christianity, you look at the people who really got into it, they became saints, the people who practiced it the hardest, who really tried to apply what Jesus was telling them. And you find out that they're levitating, you find out that they can walk through fire, you find out that they're appearing in people's dreams, they can bilocate, and they get canonized as saints. But what's interesting is that there are other cultures that have this happen as well. Other cultures where people actually go through an ascension type of experience. Tibet being a wonderful example because there's 160,000 documented cases of people activating a so-called rainbow body. And that rainbow body is capable of all kinds of cool stuff. These people would push their hand or their foot into a solid rock and leave behind a footprint or a handprint. And there are many, many places throughout Tibet, India, Nepal, Bhutan, and China where those imprints still exist, and there are shrines built around them, and people go there and they pay a pilgrimage to see these footprints and handprints. So this is not speculation. Something is going on here. There's a way to break out of that cycle of reincarnation. There's a way to get the point of what these higher beings want you to know. And the higher beings are still here now. They've had the frustration of having to work through this deep state that precisely does not want you to know they exist. But I have so many different insiders who have worked at levels of secrecy well above the classification of need to know for the President of the United States. At cosmic clearance, you're 35 levels of need to know above the President. That's a very, very heavy classification level. At that level, they know that these beings exist. They know that these beings are benevolent, they know these beings have superpowers, and they know these beings have a spiritual agenda, but they still don't want you to know, or at least they haven't yet. But these beings want to be heard. They got heard more in the ancient times, and they installed information that is relevant for us today. So I want to take you through some of that now. We have some slides. This is the world debut of David Wilcock. That's me. Yeah, I just talked about myself in third person. How lame is that? Uh-oh. David Wilcock's slides. Yes, I just did it. So here we go. Let's go to the first slide here. The Law of One series is what really put this all together for me in 1981 through 1983. And it was called originally the Raw material. Now, some of the folks who are, we can go back to camera. Some of the folks who are of the Christian orientation get really, really upset that the name of the source of the Law of One is Ra. And there's an important clarification that we have to make on that, which is that the original Ra that came to the Egyptians some 12,000 years ago was benevolent, very benevolent. And in fact, the Great Pyramid of Giza was a monument to the coming Christ. And there's all kinds of great stuff that shows us that. The proportions of the pyramid, the actual granite sarcophagus inside the king's chamber has precisely the same size dimensions as the Ark of the Covenant in the Old Testament, even though supposedly nobody had gotten into the king's chamber then because it wasn't discovered until Caliph al-Mamun somewhere in the 800s AD region. Okay? So there's a really cool bunch of information that we could talk about regarding the pyramid and what was the pyramid's original intention. But as it is explained in the Law of One, this benevolent message got distorted by the priests and the peoples of Egypt. And they took it from something positive into something extremely negative. They're bringing in this really, really sick stuff with human sacrifice, with occult rituals and ceremonies. I'm not going to get into too much detail or else we'll get demonetized, which has already happened a couple times. Suffice it to say, it got all backwards. But the original teaching was supposed to be positive, and so this source came back in 1981 and worked through a group of people that were doing research through telepathic communication, and the source of the Law of One, Carla Ruckert, was completely unconscious, had no memory of what she was saying when she came out of those sessions. So the Law of One is a very, very heavy body of teaching, and it got me hip to the idea that there was going to be some massive transformation of the world. They keep talking about it. It's like the only thing they're really concerned with is trying to get the numbers up for Ascension. And they keep saying in the Law of One that most of us are not going to be ready for this thing. Well, that's a very difficult concept, because what they're really saying is, in order to be ready for this type of ascension, which does appear to have a quantum leap event, some sort of, as we're now seeing, the solar flash, all you have to do is be slightly above 50% interested in helping people, loving people, being kind, being compassionate, rather than being manipulative, evil, conniving, and deceptive. So it's a very great idea to be nice. You really want to think about that, because just in case all this crazy stuff I'm telling you turns out to be true, I don't know about you, but I'm done with reincarnation in this third-dimensional world, getting poison ivy, getting diarrhea, vomiting, getting your heart broken, getting betrayed, people steal from you. I'm freaking done with it, okay? I'm ready for the fourth density that they talk about in the Law of One, which is 100 times more harmonious than life in third density. I'm ready for superpowers, telepathy, levitation, telekinesis, time travel, bilocation. I'm ready for UFOs, off-planet bases. This is the world that those people live in when you get to that level. You become part of space. You become part of a galactic community. But you have to go through this maturation process. You have to grow up. You have to learn from the illusion. This is the biggest teaching in the Law of One of all, I would really have to say, that the world is an illusion. We are not living in a typical materialistic universe as we think. There is a direct relationship between what we do and the results that come back to us in our life. And it seems so simple, and if you're a spiritual person, for you it probably is really simple, and it drives you crazy like it does with me, that people can't see the most obvious, this is what happens when you're live, you start coughing, the most obvious relationship between a cause and an effect. But for me, it's so clear now. Like, I'm having a negative thought about somebody, which might even seem like it's really well deserved, and then I hit myself with a knife, and I cut. Oh man, I'm bleeding. And there's thousands and thousands of different ways that these things can happen, and you don't even have to wait very long. So you have these traditional viewpoints that are telling you that that's crazy, that you're crazy, this is impossible. And if you get seduced by that stuff, somebody who's in that mindset will watch a video like this and say, I can't believe you got sucked in by that BS. I can't believe you're naive enough, you're gullible enough to believe this. But if you really start to observe your life, karma should be one of the most obvious things. And also, don't get stuck on the punitive model of karma. Remember that karma is good. All you have to do is be nice. All you have to do is smile at people, make them feel happy, do things to spread love and spread joy, and guess what's going to happen? You start making money. If you really want to get to the secret, remember that movie? It's not just about that the universe is a cosmic gumball machine, and you just write down a check for $1 million to yourself and put it on the refrigerator, and it's going to happen. A lot of people tried that after they watched the movie. It didn't happen. Except that most of the people who were telling you it was going to happen were selling the idea that it will and making money that way. Isn't that interesting? The secret really is about karma. The amount of prosperity that the universe gives to you is going to be authorized based on how much you do for others. It really is that simple. And if you start applying these principles, if you learn not to judge people, if you learn not to get angry and get your dander up, When somebody upsets you, if you learn to just let things go, to calm down, if you have a typical reaction that you normally have, you step back, no, it's good, I'm good. I'm not going to do what I usually do. Even though that person is being unloving to me, even though that person has judged me, I'm just stepping back. I'm not going to do the same thing I usually do. I'm just going to breathe for a second, take in some breaths, figure out what I'm doing, figure out what I think. And when you go there, when you embody that deeper level of evolution, really good things happen. You start making more money. You start having more friends. You get the love that you want. If you create a loving space within yourself, someone will come into that space. That's how you attract the love you need. It's by becoming love. It's by being a loving person. It seems so simple. It's like the same thing with a job interview, right? I learned how to master job interviews. I could basically nail almost any job interview I got. And the reason why is the people are not really interested in your skills. If you got the interview, your skills are good enough. You wouldn't be in that interview if they didn't think you had the skill. The reason why you get the job in the job interview is because they want to hang out with you, because they like you. So that's why they say you got to dress up real nice. That's important. But more important than that, maintaining the eye contact, being relaxed, being funny, making those people feel like, yeah, I really want to hang out with this person. I like this person. So that's the key. But this also relates to the subject of Ascension. There is a deeper spiritual class here. The world seems to really suck right now. There's so much stuff going on that's so upsetting. And in the Law of One system, it says the world is an illusion. Wait, David, what are you saying? It's an illusion. I'm saying that the world is conspiring to teach you about universal awareness. The universe is giving you this hologram where most of the people are asleep. Most of the people don't get it. They don't realize that there are these hidden spiritual forces that you're never going to see. They always use mystery. They don't come right out and hit you over the head. They give you clues, and you have to have the inspiration to follow the clues of mystery towards a destination. And when you go through those clues, you start to realize, you know what, there is some loving entity, there's some loving force guiding me through life. And when I do loving things, good things happen. And when I do negative things happen. It seems so simple, but so many people still don't get it. So let's say that you are getting it. Then what ends up happening to you is that you learn that there is a greater graduation going on. That's what Ascension is all about. Spiritual growth has a destination. There's a point to all this. There is an ultimate goal of what you're doing and where this is taking you. And it is to transform. You're not going to reincarnate. You're not going to keep coming back and coming back and coming back. You get the whole class. You get what you're here for. This third dimensional reality was supposed to teach you something, and you learned what that is. You apply the knowledge, and you move forward with it. And now you don't need to repeat this classroom. You don't need to be suffering. You don't need to be betrayed. You don't need to get robbed. You don't need to be raped. You don't need to be terrified. Because life in those higher realms is not like that. You don't feel those kinds of emotions anymore. That's what this stuff says. So there's a very interesting precedent in the ancient teachings about this, about the concept of ascension. And specifically, there's two different ways to ascend. It's taken a long time, a lot of scholarship to really nail this thing down. The type of ascension that most of us will be going through is not the rainbow body activation. Because it says in the Law of One, if you really do your homework, you can ascend whenever you want. But you go on a much higher level. Most of us are just going from third density to fourth density, which, believe me, that's good enough. I don't know why everybody wants to leapfrog over 4D and go right into 5D. That's not how it works. Unless you're an ET soul, in which case maybe it does. And that's a whole long discussion in the Law of One, too. If you're going into fourth density, that's a great thing, and most of us are doing this in conjunction with a solar event, a solar energy release, which happens cyclically after 25,920 years. That's a long period of time. The purported end of the cycle was December 21st, 2012. Obviously, it did not happen then, but all of the signs are that this event is coming. It's just that the time window is not as precise as it's striking on the hour of the clock of the day. That it is still something very real. We are seeing a ramping up in the world. We are seeing all of these things in which the illusion is breaking down, in which we are seeing through the veneer. We are seeing through the cracks of reality. We are learning the truth of our existence, of who we are, of what we're doing here, and of where this is going for us as a planet. And that is so exciting, because part of it is this concept of the tribunals and the arrests. I believe this is going to happen. I've spoken to multiple people in the Alliance, okay? And when that happens, we will learn on a collective level, there will be no blinders on anymore. That there was a very dark international force, a biblically evil force that was running the planet. Chucking out censorship like it's nothing. Blocking you, demonetizing you. And then things that are far, far worse, deploying weapon systems into the food supply. Deploying weapon systems into our reality. Setting things up to look as if it was blamed on a patsy when in fact there was a deeper cause behind violent events that occur. When you really get it, you realize, wait a minute, this is exactly like what the ancient religious texts were talking about. And the Bible's only one example. A worldwide evil force, very powerful, that you really do have to follow along with it to some degree in order to be alive. You have to play the game. You can't live in a cave. You have to drive a car. You have to burn gasoline. You have to spend money in order to eat. But that doesn't mean that it's all going to hell. This is the tool. This is the illusion. So when the illusion breaks down, the illusion of mainstream consensus thought, the illusion that's been manufactured for you, then you start to see things differently. You realize all of the teachings that you've had, all of the beliefs that you grew up with, were manufactured for you by opinion makers who controlled the media. They're not doing that now. I can say whatever the heck I want on this forum, as long as I don't get blocked or they take the video down. But that's the way it was. The authorities told you what to believe, and now we're learning, well, actually, there's probably a lot more going on that I didn't see. There's probably a much deeper level to this, and if the full scope of the evil that you're learning about, if you've been studying this stuff, if that's true, and you have any sense of a belief in a positive universe, good karma, dreams that have given you an inspiration, then you have to see that there's a positive to balance that negative. There's no way that that much negativity could exist unopposed in the universe, with it being a fundamentally benevolent universe. There is a plan for this. This is allowed to happen. We, on a collective level, our free will determines when we go through this transition, when we are ready for this solar flash, this ascension process. So now I want to talk to you about these ancient prophecies, because the ancient prophecies nailed the solar flash, and we're already an hour in, so I want to make sure that this doesn't go on too long. But let's go through some of these now, because this is very exciting stuff. Okay, so the first prophecy set that we're going to be going through here comes from Hindus, the Hindu prophecies of this coming golden age. And they talk specifically about the times that we're in now as the so-called Kali Yuga. So these Kali Yuga prophecies are remarkably accurate. So the first one we're going to read is from the Mahabharata, Book 3, which is the Vana Parva. Now before I read this, I just want to point out that the Kali Yuga is this idea of the world getting really crazy. And in the Hindu tradition, there are a series of these cycles that we go through. And before you get the big Satya Yuga, the big solar flash that they call Samavartika fires, you're going to see in a minute here, it's part of the programming. It's part of the actual divine script that the world gets really messed up, that things get really upsetting. That's where this Kali Yuga comes in. So let's read what it actually says in the Mahabharata about it. In the Kali age, the Brahmanas abstain from prayer and meditation. Those are the holy people. The course of the world looks contrary, and indeed, these are the signs that foreshadow the universal destruction. And, O Lord of men, Numerous Meleka kings then rule over the earth. And I find this one funny because Meleka, it's like an onomatopoetic word. Onomatopoeia means a word that sounds like what it's supposed to mean. Meleka, Melech, right? So it's a pretty apt description, and there's a lot of ways to see Meleka kings going on right now. We have massive public uprisings going on in France. They are still ongoing. The Yellow Vest protests, you don't hear anything about this in the Western media. Over here on this side of the pond. Same thing's going on in Spain now. Okay, million people plus all getting together and marching. So let's see what else they have to say here. And those sinful monarchs addicted to false speech govern their subjects on principles that are false. And men and women become short-lived, weak in strength, energy, and prowess. And endued with small might and diminutive bodies, they become scarcely truthful in speech. Many people at such periods strive to rob the wealth that was deposited with them in trust and secrecy. Wedded to these sinful practices, they shamelessly declare there is nothing in deposit. So there you go. You're hearing about these worldwide negative powers, sinful monarchs, who literally rob the world. And that's what's happened, is that there is a global financial crisis going on, a global depression, which you can't really see by looking at the stock market numbers. That's what's so clever. There's compartmentalization between what the stocks are doing and what people are actually experiencing in their daily lives, which is very, very different. Let's keep reading now. And only by the time they get to be 16 years old, people are overcome with decrepitude and decay, and their life starts to run out. So we're burning out at a very young age. When lives of people become so short, then a drought occurs that extends for many, many years. Well, this is what's happening in California right now. But actually what's so interesting is that lately we've been getting a whole heck of a lot of rain, and that's really cool, suggesting that this deep state apparatus has finally lost control of weather modification technology. There's a lot of really great briefings on that, and that gets back to some very cool stuff going on where the Alliance has seized control of the satellites and the ground bases that can do this. Now that they've turned the juice off, it has been raining like crazy in California. That's all it does, is rain, rain, rain. Now the next part of this prophecy is very metaphorical, and a lot of times it comes through in this dreamlike way, so don't take this literally, but check it out. 7 blazing suns appearing in the firmament drink up all the waters of the earth in rivers or seas, and then, O Bharata, the fire called Samvardhaka, impelled by the winds, appears on earth, already been dried to cinders by the 7 suns. Okay, so there's the first example that I'm sharing with you of this so-called Samvardhaka fire prophecy, which in the Hindu scripture is clearly affiliated with the sun. That there's a drought, it gets worse and worse and worse, and then there is this Samvardhaka solar flash. And what we then see is that this transitions into the golden age, which is the Satya Yuga, as you can see here. Its various terms for it would be the Satya Yuga, the Krita Yuga. Those both mean the same thing. So let's read about that. When those terrible times will be over, the creation begins again. The clouds commence to shower seasonably. The stars and stellar conjunctions become auspicious. The planets duly revolving in their orbits will become exceedingly propitious. And all around there will be prosperity, abundance, health, and peace. I guess you got to take that bug out of the way there. Yeah, we got it. He is on it. So then, the other really cool thing about Hindu prophecy is that the Kalki avatar then shows up with 8 superhuman faculties. Check this out. Commissioned by time, a Brahmana of the name of Kalki will take his birth. He will glorify Vishnu, possess great energy, intelligence, and prowess. Vehicles, weapons, warriors, arms, and coats of mail will be at his disposal as soon as he will think of them. So this is a guy or a being, might not even have a gender really. Some of these beings appear to be androgynous, but it manifests whatever it wants. It's a warrior for truth. There's some sort of, if you will, extraterrestrial, oh, there it is, like Giorgio on Ancient Aliens, right? The dude with the hair. It's aliens, dude. Well, there's good guys and there's bad guys. I believe there's both. The good guys are really, really good, and once we get to a certain point in our evolution, apparently they are authorized to show up. And it's not going to be any of us here, most likely. This is going to be something that comes in that really comes in to help us and does some amazing stuff. So check out all the things Kalki Avatar is supposed to do. He will be the King of Kings, ever victorious with the strength of virtue. This sounds very messianic. He will restore order and peace in this world that's been crowded with creatures and contradictory in its course. And that blazing Brahmana of mighty intellect, having appeared, will destroy all negative things. That's an important caveat to that quote. He will be the destroyer of all that is negative to inaugurate this new yuga, surrounded by the holy people. That Brahmana, that holy person, will exterminate all these Malekka kings wherever these low and despicable persons take refuge. When the Brahmanas will have exterminated the thieves and robbers, there will be prosperity everywhere on earth. Okay, try to grok that one for a second. We're literally seeing here that this guy, or this being, whoever it is, actually takes the law into his own hands, cleans up the planet, stops the negativity. Now, is this literal or is this figurative? There's probably a lot of it that's figurative, because if you really get into what the Alliance is doing, that's what's happening. They are arresting these people. It's in the ancient prophecy. This is part of what we go through. And then, very likely, once the secrecy is gone and we get some kind of disclosure, we get information about extraterrestrial beings. We get the knowledge that UFO sightings are not swamp gas, that there actually are beings visiting us, that there are entire huge programs in the military-industrial complex where these people are routinely interacting with people from Earth. And they have the superpowers and they have the spiritual consciousness. When you go near them, you feel this radiant energy. Let's now discuss the 8 superhuman faculties of the Kalki Avatar. This is very cool. This comes from Virtual Maastricht McLuhan Institute, and in general they say that this being will have great power, might, dominion, supremacy, dignity, superhuman capability. So one of the abilities that the Avatar has is the ability to become small, which they call anima. He can become very light. He could walk on water, lagima. This is well before Jesus, remember. This was written a long time before the Bible. The power to attain anything, manifestation, that's prapti. Irresistible will, the ability to project consciousness and to actually get negative beings to do what you want, which you got to be very careful with that use. Limitless bulk, or mahima, that means the ability to become very, very heavy, and actually that could be useful in certain cases. Supreme dominion, now this is one of the things I want to just pause on, which is dominion over the animal side, dominion over your material passions is very important to the Hindus. They believe that you do not want to get trapped in your ego. You want to not get caught up in materialism, in wealth, in defending yourself, in jealousy, deceit, trickery, lying. It's very important to have the dominion over your lower self, to stay in that very exalted state of consciousness where you are loving and you are radiant and you are supportive of other people. So this being has that quality. That's what they're talking about here on number 6. Let's go on. Subjugation by magic, again, this is relating to the subjugation of your animal side, and the power to suppress all desire. So you see they actually dedicated 3 different earmarks just to that. So now I want to take you into this science of the Samvartika flash, because this is where the action happens. And what they tell us is that the solar flash occurs after the Earth has hit its worst point. Now when you just look up the word Samvartika, you find 12 direct references to it. As you can see here, this site, sacredtext.com, has the word Samvartika in it, and you can see here that there are 12 results. This is the Mahabharata is listed on Sacred Text, so that's a good way to search the Hindu text and find out what's there. 12 references. Now, that doesn't sound like a whole lot, but this is the next big key. You got to flip it from Samvartika to Samvarta. And when you do that, now another 31 references pop up. And we can show you that as well with a Google search. Buddhism has the same thing, in which they call it the Samvata fire, so it actually did carry over from Hinduism to Buddhism. But then it gets even more outrageous when you discover, as I did more recently, the term Yuga fire, because now when you type that in, you get 187 search engine hits in the Mahabharata, as you can see right here, for Yuga fire. Now let's split a little bit of hairs. Approximately 65 of them, the word yuga and the word fire, are not directly next to each other, but there are still 122 references to the fire that occurs at the end of the Kali Yuga. And in fact, most of these 187 references still refer to epic events occurring at the end of the Yuga. So let's do the math now. You got 4 Samvartas, 31 Samavartikas, 122 Yuga fires. It's a total of approximately 157 references. I'm not going to go more crazy than that. The point is, this is a very frequently discussed subject, considered a fact within this teaching, and it all is paving the way to this wonderful Satya Yuga. So, when they say Yuga fire, it's a very specific reference where they're talking about energy coming off of the sun, this blindingly bright light that the sun gives off. The Hindus leave no ambiguity about what they're predicting. It's right there, and as you saw, there's at least 150 different references to this thing. Everybody talks about it in the Mahabharata as if it's just a commonly known thing, that there's this Samvartika fire at the end of the age, or Samvata fire, or Yuga fire at the end of the Yuga. The sun gives off this amazing radiant light, and if you are ready for it, you get transformed by it. That's what inaugurates, that's what kickstarts the Satya Yuga. It transforms everything about our world as we know it. So let's take a look at that now. What is the Satya Yuga? The Satya Yuga is, according to Hindu belief, the golden age of righteousness, free of sin, marked by longevity, physical strength, beauty, and stature. And back in the days this was written, there were giants whose moral, mental, and physical strength enabled them to undergo long periods of continence, which is actual celibacy. They were really big on that in the Hindu tradition, and tapas, or austerities, which again is renouncing all the worldly possessions. Now it's interesting to note that Hinduism was where a lot of this stuff about the monk in the forest comes from. And that carried over to Buddhism to a degree, but there are other spiritual traditions that tell us that you do in fact need to make use of the resources of the world. Like the Law of One, they talk about this. You can't live in a cave today. That's not the answer. You're not going to gain enlightenment by dropping out from the world. What happens is you become a mooch, actually. You end up borrowing from other people, and you're not taking care of yourself. So part of what makes this time that we're in so poignant is that you can't just give up. You can't just live off of other people. You have to actually take care of yourself, and if you don't do that, you're going to get slammed in every direction. So then the real discipline becomes, how do you do that and still live a spiritual life? That's where things get really interesting. Let's read more about the Satya Yuga now. Longevity permitted lengthy spiritual exercises. Life then depended on the marrow and lasted a certain number of years, called a lak, where people die when they decide to. And again, their stature 21 cubits. There do appear to be giants. That's probably an exaggeration of how big they were. But again, another term for this is Krita Yuga, which has 72 references in the Mahabharata, as you can see here from, again, the Sacred Texts website. Krita Yuga. So, we're going to read about this in the Karna Parva. This is something that we love on Ancient Aliens, this kind of stuff. Like men with diseased eyes who are unable to gaze at the sun, the Kauravas on that occasion, this is a type of beings that were in the Mahabharata, could not gaze at Jaya, who seemed to be possessed of the energy of the all-destroying sun that rises at the end of the Yuga, having arrows for his rays and Gandiva for his beautiful circular disc. So there's other references in the Mahabharata to the Vimanas, to these actual silvery discs that they were flying around in. And they're very specific about the description. They don't make any sound. They can fly right through mountains. They have some kind of particle beam weapons. So this is a really cool one where you get a reference to the disc in the ancient text, and you hear about the Yuga fire happening at the end of the age. Let's have another example now. This is Book 12, Santi Parva, in which we hear about this really amazing ascended being calling itself Mahadeva. The great god Mahadeva, suspending both prana and apana, the two foremost of 5 life breaths, by shutting his mouth properly, casting glances on every side, revealed himself there, possessing many eyes, the vanquisher of all foes, the lord of even the gods of all gods, suddenly arose from within the pit in which was kept the sacrificial fire. Now what are we talking about here? it appears that these types of energetic beings, when they project themselves into a space, regardless of where people are standing around them in 360 degrees, they will appear to be looking right at you when you look at them. So they appear to have multiple faces. This is how people interpreted it, because each person gets a different thought projection from that being. So then they would do things like, and you see this in some of the Hindu artwork, where there's these beings that have all these different faces, right? Because no matter where you're standing, they're looking right at you. Now this being has a certain type of radiant light. This is much higher level being than the normal ETs that appear to be part of the world in the Hindu scriptures, that it was actually a multi-species culture on Earth at that time. But then what is it about Mahadeva's light that's so interesting? Let's keep reading here. Possessed of the brightness or effulgence of 1,000 suns and looking like another Samvardhaka, the great god smiled gently at Daksha, addressing him, said, "What, O Brahmana, shall I do for you?" So he looks like another Samvardhaka. This suggests that the people in this culture knew that the sun does this, know that the sun gives off this big flash of energy, and then this being manifested that had the same energetic quality just by looking at it. So again, they talk about this solar flash like everybody knows what's going on. Now I'm going to bring you another reference. This is from book 13, Anusasanika Parva. And let's check this one out. It goes on about Mahadeva. Verily, Mahadeva shone like the Lord of Stars while he is at his full. The fire born of his energy resembled in effulgence the lightning flashing amidst the clouds. It seemed as if 1,000 suns were rising there, filling every side with a dazzling splendor. The energy of the Supreme Lord looked like the Samvardhaka fire, which destroys all creatures at the end of the Yuga. And again, it's probably a mistranslation. It destroys the negativity. Don't think about this as some extinction level event. Think about it as a transfiguration, and all these different prophecies tell you that if you're ready for it, you get on this cosmic springboard and you go through something really great. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about here is about this period of great tribulation that leads to the event. We're going to take this now from book 3, the Vanaparva, and they talk again about the Samvardhaka fire. This is one of the really amazing quotes about it. Then, O Bharata, the fire called Samvardhaka, impelled by the winds, appears on earth that has already been dried by the 7 suns. The fire penetrates through the earth and making its appearance also in the nether regions, which is beneath the surface of the earth, the underground worlds that they live in, apparently, from our various insiders. This begets great terror in the hearts of the gods, the Danavas, and the Yakshas. And O Lord of the earth, consuming the nether regions as also everything upon the earth, the fire destroys all things in a moment. And again, the negative things. The Lord of all things, that fire, blazing forth in effulgence, consumes this universe with its gods, Asuras, Gandharvas, Yakshas, snakes, and Rakshasas. And there rise in the sky deep masses of clouds, looking like herds of elephants and decked with wreaths of lightning that are wonderful to behold. And some of those clouds are of the hue of the blue lotus, some are of the water lily, some resemble in tint the filaments of the lotus, some are purple, and some are yellow as turmeric, and some of the hue of the crow's egg. And this actually directly relates to a vision that Corey Good had that we've talked about. This was, I guess, over a year and a half ago now, something like that, in which, if you believe what he said, and I do believe that he had real experiences, he had a vision that was shown to him from these angelic beings describing this solar flash event, and that the sky was all lit up with aurora borealis of multiple rainbow colors. When he told me that, I got very excited because I remembered this prophecy from the Hindu scripture, and I could never understand why would a bright white light solar flash, as is reported in various other places in the Mahabharata, create rainbow colored light in the sky. Well, the answer is, if the sun gives off a huge burst of energy, then the rainbow colors are the aurora borealis, because all that electrical particle activity in our atmosphere creates an amazing, amazing aurora. So one of the things that we might see is the whole sky flickering with rainbow colored light, and that is very exciting. All right. And, O Muni, when that fierce and malicious Daityas and Rakshasas who are incapable of being killed by even the foremost of the gods are born on earth, these are basically reptilians from what we now think based on all our research. I then, this is the avatar being, I then take my birth in the families of virtuous men, and by assuming human body, I restore tranquility by exterminating all evils. Now let's really stop there for a second, because everybody likes to get so literal with these prophecies, right? What if it's not literal? What if it's metaphorical? What if what the Alliance is doing right now is the fulfillment of the prophecy that the bad guys, the Maleka kings, they're actually being stood up to? That's what's so exciting about QAnon. That's what's so exciting about the sealed indictments. That's what's so exciting about the idea that tribunals have begun. We're actually doing this. We're fulfilling the prophecy. We have to become the hero. We have to take on that mantle of responsibility. And there does appear to be also some sort of solar flash that happens as we get up to this point that kickstarts this golden age. So I wanted to try to keep this maybe to 90 minutes, but I have some time left here, so I want to get into Zoroastrianism now. This is really cool. The real Bible of Zoroastrianism in terms of historical research is by Boyce and Grenette, called A History of Zoroastrianism. This is a monster thick book, and it represents the best scholarship of all the different little shards of papyrus or whatever they could find to rebuild this weird Persian religion. And it's very cool. Zoroaster's future expectations were fixed upon this loved and familiar earth. It is on this planet, restored to its original perfection, that the kingdom of this messianic being, which they call Ahura Mazda, is to come. Same concept, messianic. The blessed are to live here eternally, in this presence, solid flesh on solid ground. It is an end of history that was foretold, not the end of the world. How much more important can you get than that? The idea is that this is something that happens to us here on earth. Just like they said in the Hindu scripture that it will be, this avatar presence will be born into people. People are the heroes. The heroes take care of this. That is what appears to be happening, building up to some very, very exciting public disclosure. Now let's talk about the future prophecy of Zoroastrianism. Zoroaster's fundamental message was that the triumph of good would come when evil had been progressively weakened through the focused efforts of the just. Human virtues such as justice, faith, liberality, and joy will then increase throughout the world. And vices such as tyranny, enmity, which is jealousy, heresy, and injustice will dwindle away. Isn't that great? Zoroaster perceived the salvation of the world as dependent both on cosmic striving and on the sum of individual human choices. And these two conjoined aspects of Zoroaster's teachings, emphasis on our individual responsibility and the concern for the whole cosmos, make his doctrines strikingly relevant to the concerns and the problems of the Hellenistic age. Hopefully you can see all that. All right. They also talk about this future body that we're going to get. That at the last day, the bones of those who are spiritually dead, not physically dead, that's a very important distinction, will be clothed again in this spiritual flesh, reanimated by the soul, which, this is Boyce and Grenette talking, has been existing apart in heaven, hell, or limbo, according to the judgment that you have at death. That's what they believe. And again, this is subject to interpretation. According to Zoroaster, each created thing, whether animate or inanimate, possesses its own indwelling force or spirit, and the Creator created these spirits first, and then the material forms. At the end of time, there will be a return to that spiritual perfection in this so-called future body, where those who are blessed enter into this kingdom of the divine in the ideal form of a just soul, clad in an unblemished body, made immortal and undecaying. And there's some really interesting similarities between Zoroastrianism and Christianity that I want to point out here because, first of all, the three wise men that came to see Jesus were wearing Zoroastrian clothing and carrying Zoroastrian gifts, the gold, frankincense, and myrrh. It's right out of the Zoroastrian scripture. The Zoroastrian scripture also says they're looking for a Messiah, which they call Saoshyant. And so when they saw these signs and they followed the star, this was them thinking they had found their Messiah. So One of Boyce and Grenet's really interesting arguments is that the conventional idea of this new golden transfiguration that we all go through, this golden age, is a derivative of Zoroastrian prophecy. It comes into the Bible from Zoroastrianism, and it comes into other cultures, but they also say that it's indistinct. It doesn't have one point of origin. So let's talk about the similarities now between Zoroastrianism and Christianity, because there's a lot. They both believe in one supreme loving God. They both have what appear to be concepts of heaven, hell, and individual judgment. They both teach this idea of an Ascension event where there's an ultimate triumph of good over evil. Evil is completely vanquished. They both have a strict moral and ethical code. They both have a messianic figure that comes to restore the planet, just as we saw in Hinduism. They have concepts of resurrection, a final judgment, and life everlasting. And the words Satan, paradise, and amen actually come from Zoroastrian origins. Now, the key word you want to know in Zoroastrianism for this solar flash is frashokareti. So let's read this from encyclopedia.com. The actual translation of that word is to make wonderful. It responds to a rehabilitation of existence. It also is the word frashgird, a Middle Persian term for the last judgment or the final day of humanity's existence. The Avestan term derives from the expression to make our existence splendid. Now, I'm going to read you from another encyclopedia on frashokareti now. It is clearly intended what making life frasha or wonderful actually implies. What are we going to turn into here? We will become ageless without decay. We will not rot or putrefy. We will live forever and thrive forever and rule at will. The dead will rise, revived by the one who does not decay, and life will be created anew in an excellent and perfect way. This is really heavy stuff. Falsehood will be driven out of the good creation back to the place it had come from for its destructive purposes. Ashtuat Areta, this is their Saoshyant, their final Messiah in Zoroastrianism. Ashtuat Areta will emerge from Lake Hamun, again this is all metaphorical, wielding the victorious weapon which other heroes bore before him, and this being will drive falsehood out of the world of truth. With his gaze of insight and strength, he will render the whole corporal world indestructible. Nothing bad happens anymore. His companions will advance and rage, and these evil beings will flee before them. Good thought overcomes evil thought. The rightly spoken word overcomes falsely spoken words. Wholeness and immortality overcome hunger and thirst. And finally, this evil being, Anra Mainyu, or Ahriman, has to retreat, powerless. So you can see here, this is some very, very interesting prophetic information showing everything starts to line up, and I'm not even going through all of it. I'm just giving you a few of these different prophecies. But I also want to get to this next one from revolvi.com about frashokareti. Let's take a look. On earth, the Saoshyant will bring about a resurrection of the dead in the bodies they had before they died. And again, I believe that's metaphorical. This is followed by a last judgment through ordeal. Again, it gets a little dramatic here. The Yazatas, Aryaman and Attar will melt the metal in the hills and the mountains, and the molten metal will then flow across the earth like a river. Okay, let's stop right there. So this is a very interesting connection because, again, in Hinduism, they clearly describe the sun giving off a flash. They call it the Samvardhaka fire. And they say that it has this brilliant, blinding white light, which apparently also activates the atmosphere, causing an aurora borealis. In Zoroastrianism, you don't get the sun doing anything, but what they do have is this presence of molten metal, this energy. So that's an energetic manifestation. Now, it may be, because remember, Zoroaster came a lot more recently than the Mahabharata. The Mahabharata is a genuine ancient text, whereas Zoroaster only really lived, in BC era, but not that far back before. So it's an ancient text, but it's not all the way back to where the Mahabharata was. So I believe ultimately that Zoroaster was given visions, and he wrote them down as best he could, and there gets to be a telephone game. You don't quite get all of it exactly the way you want. So Zoroaster's vision, to my reckoning, of this idea of molten metal coming down from the mountains was just him seeing this solar flash, this blinding white light, and then trying to interpret the vision in a way that he could understand, and then kind of writing it down with, or maybe he got a dream, and in the dream it was the mountains actually being melted of some fashion. But anyway, when you really look beneath trying to get all scriptural and trying to get like exactly precisely, no, this is the word, this is what it means, get to the underlying meaning, there's a connection here. So we're going to keep going now with this interesting passage. All human beings, both living and the resurrected dead, will be required to wade through this river of blinding white light, but for the righteous, which they call Ashavan, it will seem to be a river of warm milk, but the wicked people will actually be burned by it. The river will then flow down to hell, where it will annihilate Angra Mainyu. That's the derivation of the word anger, believe it or not. It means the devil, means, Satan. And Setariman, that's another word that comes out of Zoroastrianism. And the last vestiges of wickedness in the universe. So again, it's this weird solar flash prophecy. There's something going on here. Thereafter, humankind will become like the Amisha Spentas, these spiritual beings. We will not need food, we won't get hungry or thirsty, we don't need weapons, and we have no possibility of being injured. Our material bodies will now become so light that we cast no shadow. That's what the visions spoke to him and said. All humanity will speak a single language and belong to a single nation without borders. All of us will share a single purpose and goal, and join with the divine for perpetual exaltation of God's glory. And you can use whatever word you choose for a divine creator there. Now, this is work, by the way, that took me many, many years to do, and what was interesting was that nobody had done this. There was no conventional scholarship that I could find that tied together these different prophecies in a substantive way. So I ended up having to do that for you. Let's go over here. I want to get close. This is exciting. So I ended up finding papers that were describing prophecies in Roman and Greek literature that these papers had only been read by 52 people in the world. And I stumbled over this while I was working on, I believe, my first book, Source Field Investigations, and it tied everything together so well. It was the most obscure historical scholarship imaginable, but it links through, because let's think about this now. And I haven't even given you all the different prophecies. There's a whole lot of this solar flash stuff in Egyptian prophecy. It goes all over the place. I'm just giving you some for this particular video. But now I want to talk about Stoicism, which is a particular variety of Roman philosophy. Okay? The Stoics had an actual word for the solar flash. And the word, it's very confusing because when I started to research this word, I discovered that it was actually spelled 4 different ways, depending on whether there is a C or a K, and depending on whether there is a Y or a U in the word. So the most common spelling of the word you're going to see right here is with a K and a Y, ekpyrosis, but it could also be ECPU, and there's other different ways to spell it. Now, what the heck is ekpyrosis? It's actually a word about the solar flash that the Romans were using widely in their time. Stoicism is a part of Roman philosophy, a Stoic belief in the periodic destruction of the cosmos by a great conflagration every great year. Now, what does that word mean? Conflagration means a massive fire. The cosmos is then recreated, which is what they call palingenesis, only to be destroyed again at the end of another new cycle. So it's very cyclical. This form of catastrophe is the opposite of kataklysmos, the destruction of the earth by water. That's where the word cataclysm comes from, obviously. This concept of ekpyrosis is attributed to Chrysippus by the Greek historian Plutarch. I hit the wall. Whew. A really good way to know when you run out of time is when you lose your voice. So with that being said, let me try to get my voice back here for a second. Ooh, you're not supposed to look at all this stuff. This is really important. I want to get to this. Okay, I got to project my voice a little bit less, and I'll probably be able to get through the last of this. This is probably my favorite Ascension prophecy of all, and it's literally right there on the dollar bill, and the dollar bill has this great seal, which is the weird pyramid symbol with the eye. And if you've never seen this from me, this is one of the coolest things I've ever discovered. It comes from the Sibylline Mysteries. Let's take a look. Here is that symbol, and you'll notice that it says at the top, Annuit Septis, and at the bottom it says Novus Ordo Seclorum. What does Novus Ordo Seclorum actually mean? We learned what it means from the Civil War hero Charles A.L. Totten. Here he is as a young man, and here he is as an older man looking disturbingly similar to Dr. Sigmund Freud with that weird little devil beard. Now, Totten was the first lieutenant in the 4th Artillery of the U.S. Army, and at some point he wrote a letter to the Secretary of the Treasury, Charles Folger, on February 10th, 1882. And he tells you right out in the open what Novus Ordo Seclorum means. Novus Ordo Seclorum is a quotation from Virgil's 4th Eclogue, and Virgil got it from the mystic Sibylline records. Now bear in mind, right, the average person writes a letter to the Secretary of the Treasury, it's not going to go into the congressional record, it's not going to become a big deal. So this guy's got to be somebody important if it actually goes on the congressional record. Now one of the things you've learned if you've studied this secret mystery school stuff is they have to tell us what's going on. They can't hide the truth. So they did tell us what that symbol is about, what Novus Ordo Seclorum actually means. And it comes from the Sibylline mystery texts. Now who is the Sibyl? Here is an artistic rendition of the Sibyl of Cumae. And here she is up close. Now, in the Roman tradition, there were 12 wise women called oracles. And they were essentially working as priestesses, as Elizabeth would call them. And I totally support the use of that word. And these oracles had temples, and they had other priestesses who would help them in many cases. And you would go there and you would get a psychic reading. That was one of the main things. They also did healing work, but the oracles would give you prophetic knowledge. So you could get the equivalent of intuitive spiritual guidance. And this became kind of a big deal. These temples got very popular, and a lot of people would go there. But there was one temple that was very strange and mysterious, in which the woman did not want to go public. She was hiding away, and she was in the volcanic caves carved out by lava under Mount Vesuvius in the far western end of Roman territory. This was the Sibyl of Cumae. The town was called Cumae. Now she was very different than the other Sibyls, and I say this because she would actually get this type of psychedelic trance by breathing the ethylene gas from the volcanic vents. Ethylene is a psychedelic compound, and apparently she also took the extract of bay laurel leaves. And if you take that bay laurel leaf extract and you're huffing ethylene gas, do not try this at home. Even if you live in Hawaii and you know where the volcanic gas is, there's carbon monoxide in there. This is very dangerous. Do not do this. But she had found out a way to make this work. She went into a weird trance state. She'd write her prophecies down on oak leaves and then put them out in front of one of about 130 different mouths to this cave complex. People started to collect the leaves. They started to look at the prophecies. They got very excited because they said, this stuff comes true. She's writing things down that then actually come true. How amazing is that? It eventually got the attention of the king. She gets brought in by the king's priests, and she has 9 books. And she says to the king, King Tarquin of Rome, in these books are contained the entire future history of Rome. Future history of Rome? What the heck do you mean? She says that it's a prophetic view of what will happen and when it's going to happen. And he laughs at her and he says, okay, well, you know, apparently you want to sell me these books. So how much do you want for these books? She says, 9 bags of gold. 9 bags of gold, that's outrageous. That's like just, to our equivalent, it would be many, many millions of dollars. So he laughs in her face and she says, fine, you don't want the books, that's fine. She burns 3 of the books up right in front of him, and the priests are horrified. She leaves. They bring her back later on because now her reputation is growing. Now she's only got 6 books. Same thing happens. How much you want for these? She says 9 bags of gold. The priests are begging the king, please, please buy the books. She's so amazing, she's so accurate. But the king refuses to do it, it's too much money, so she burns 3 more of the books. When she comes back the 3rd time, the priests are literally ready to sell their children into slavery or do whatever it takes. I'll give up all my money, please, please, please. The king actually goes for it and pays her 9 bags of gold, and it's reported that they actually had to haul the gold off with teams of donkeys with poles between the donkeys because gold is very, very heavy. So she brought all that back to her cave. I don't know what the heck you're going to do with a bunch of gold sitting in the cave, but she apparently had a great time. But the point is, they got a hold of these books in Rome, and it became the greatest treasure in Roman history. And they ultimately believed the value of these books was literally as much as an entire gigantic room filled to the ceiling with gold. The Romans went to extraordinary lengths to try to get back the material that was in the other 6 books. They did it through different oracles. They tried to get those oracles to resuscitate the hidden writings, but it's widely believed that nobody was able to do that. And my personal feeling is, if she's that good of a psychic, she knew she wasn't going to close the deal until the 3rd time, and the first 6 books were probably just empty, right? She just was playing him the whole time. That's what I think is going on. Anyway, the really, really interesting part about this prophecy is that the priests got a hold of the books, they ran off as soon as the king bought them, and they start reading them right away. And they see future events that are coming up that look very destructive. The classic example is that they saw there was going to be a famine in the spring. And they see, wow, we don't want this famine to happen. The king ordered all the food to be locked up in a vault with guards in front of the vault and only to be opened up in the spring, and everybody's on austere food rations up until then. So then they open up the vault in the spring, and now guess what happens? The food has all gone to blight. It is rotted because there was a leak inside the room. And now they have a famine. It was a self-fulfilling prophecy. And because they tried to stop the prophecy from happening, it actually made the prophecy happen. So this is something that the people in these ancient mystery schools and what you find out in some of the Hollywood movies, it's a very consistent element. Like in The Matrix, when the Oracle, right, the same word, she's a cigarette-smoking lady, she says to Neo, and don't worry about the vase. And he goes, what vase? And she goes, what's really going to bake your noodle is, would you have broken it if I hadn't have said anything? That is a modern rendition of this Roman myth, which is really not a myth. This is what happened. Yeah, we're just living our lives here. So anyway, it's a modern myth of what really happened. And the really important point here is that there was a prophecy, there was prophecies about the future. They extended through all these different levels, all these different times, and they were consistently accurate, but the priests were so worried about the information getting into the wrong hands that they built the equivalent of Area 51. They actually had the tallest hill in Rome called Capitoline Hill, Temple of Jupiter, they built that up there, and they guarded it with multiple levels of security because if the enemy got a hold of this book, the enemy would know what disasters were going to happen, when they were going to happen, and they could actually manipulate that information and use that knowledge to Rome's detriment. So this is why they saw this as the greatest treasure in Roman history. Priests were only allowed to read the book after a disaster happened, and on multiple occasions, the book actually foretold the disaster precisely, and they're like, well, yeah, it's already happening. Here it is, the plague of locusts. Here it is, the big frickin' storm. It's got the time, it's got the event, and it's too late. So when Rome collapsed, Virgil was allowed to copy over some of these prophecies about far future events that hadn't happened yet into his eclogues. So Novus Ordo Seclorum, as Charles A.L. Totten said when he wrote the letter to the Secretary of the Treasury, Charles Folger, in 1882, this guy, Charles A.L. Totten, tells you what Novus Ordo Seclorum means. It came from the Sibylline mystery texts, these highly classified Roman documents from this psychic woman. They allowed Virgil to copy it over, and it's a prophecy about what's happening now. That's what makes this so exciting. Novus Ordo Seclorum is a shortened version of a Roman phrase, the full phrase being Magnus ab integro seclorum nascitur ordo. I got a slide for this. Let's take a look at this. This is really cool. The actual translation in English of what I just said is, a mighty order of ages is born anew. This is the solar flash prophecy yet again. Both the prophetic Virgin and Saturnian kingdoms now return. Now a new progeny is let down from the lofty heavens. The boy will soon be born, in whom the Iron Age shall come to an end, and the Golden One shall arise again in the whole earth. This is literally the light body activation. This is the activation of our collective light body on a much larger level. Now, who would have ever thought that the US dollar bill would have that kind of a prophecy embedded into it? But wait, there's more. Let's keep going. Whatso tracks remain of our old wickedness, once done away, shall free the earth from never-ceasing fear. He, this boy with the golden light, this is a messianic figure once again, he shall receive the life of gods, see heroes with gods commingling, and himself be seen of them, and with his Father's worth reign over a world at peace. Now, the funny part is that whoever was speaking through the Sibyl of Cumae, first of all, it was not her. I believe it was some kind of extraterrestrial angelic intelligence. They used trickery to get the Romans interested enough to write this stuff down so that it would pass over to our time. Think about it, right? Rome was a nasty empire. Let's go over to this one. Rome was a nasty empire. So they're not doing Rome any favors. There was no strategic value for the Romans in getting these prophecies. In fact, it made it worse. If they read the prophecy, if they tried to stop these things from happening, it only made it worse. But the Romans got so excited about this that they wrote it down, and we actually inherited that prophecy on the US dollar bill, right? Hardly anybody knows this. I'm still basically the only person I'm aware of who's actually brought up this piece of research. If there are others, please tell me, because I haven't seen it. The interesting point is that the prophecy talks about the Golden One shall be born, in whom the Iron Age shall come to an end. The Golden One shall arise again in the whole earth. And they're also saying that the Virgin and Saturnian kingdoms will return, and that the earth is restored to some sort of perfection. This is the same prophecy again. This is ekpyrosis. This is the idea of the Samvartika fire. This is the idea of frasho kareti, to make wonderful. It shows up in the Bible. It shows up in the Quran. It shows up in the Old Testament and the New Testament, and it's in Buddhism as well. And I'm not going to do all this. I just wanted to give you guys a cool overview, keep it within 2 hours, which I think I'm going to make it here. So let's talk now about the Tibetan Buddhist teachings of the rainbow body. That's the last thing I really want to get into here. I do cover a lot of this material in my book, The Ascension Mysteries, and it is also going to be coming up in our class, which is happening soon, and you can sign up for this. It's going to be called the Ascension Mystery School, just like you saw in our opening intro. Now, what I'm really fascinated by is this man, Namkhai Norbu, who was a whistleblower. He came forward and wrote this book, Dream Yoga and the Practice of Natural Light, basically breaking the secrecy of the Tibetan teachings. He actually talks about this idea of people achieving rainbow body in the book. And he says that the way that you get there is by accessing this thing he calls the mother light. So one of the ways that you do this is by meditating on this symbol that they call the tigli. And this is the way that it looks. It is actually the syllable A. That's the Sanskrit vowel for the letter A that you see in the middle there. And you imagine this vibration giving off rainbow-colored light. And that apparently is the origin of the universe, which is curiously similar to this concept of this geometric pattern, this vibration starting the universe. Now, as I was saying, there are 160,000 documented cases of people meditating on this tigli, meditating on the idea of this vibration, making the tone, that's part of it. You actually do make the sound ah, and you let that happen, and you visualize rainbows coming off of your body. And apparently you can activate your rainbow body this way. And you have to, again, make your awareness that of emptiness, and then you're thinking about your consciousness being the whole universe. And you have to also, this is something we learned from another Tibetan whistleblower, this time Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche, in his book Rainbow Painting, where he says, all you have to do is think only loving thoughts for 13 years and be in this meditative state the whole time, and then you get to ascend whenever you want. You turn into a rainbow body. Well, rainbow body is really fascinating because what happens is that your body actually shrinks down. You choose when you're going to die, first of all. It's not a normal death, though. This is very different. You stop breathing, and then they wrap you up in these very colorful silk garments, and then your body actually shrinks inside the garments over the course of 7 days, leaving behind a little figurine of ash that's about 7 inches tall. That's it. Obviously, bodies don't normally do this. We leave behind a life-size skeleton of bones. That is not what happens in the rainbow body case. Now, what's so amazing is that in modern times, apart from these 160,000 documented cases, which Tibetans take very seriously, they have the little ash figurines, they have the handprints and the footprints in the rock you can go see. A Catholic priest, Father Francis Tiso, here he is, take a look. He actually got financed by the Institute of Noetic Sciences out of San Francisco to travel over to Tibet, and he personally witnessed the rainbow body activation of this man right here, Khenpo Achos. This is one of the guys who apparently was able to be happy enough that he had only loving thoughts for 13 years, and then when the time comes, he stops breathing, they wrap up his body in these beautiful silk garments, and he disappears over the course of 7 days. His body shrinks, and then they see rainbow-colored light coming off of the hut. They hear music, and then Khenpo or whoever starts to visit people in their dreams. Now again, you have scientists who went there and witnessed this happen, studied it. It's also been studied by the Chinese military. We know that this is real. There's plenty of documented evidence about this. It's just really far out compared to our Western way of thinking. But it also ties in very, very nicely with the concept of the Shroud of Turin. A lot of people have a hard time with this, but you've seen the images where it appears to be a photographic negative. In 2009, this particular article came out, and it was also to promote a particular video, which as you can see here is called The Fabric of Time. I'm going to read this to you because it says, a new video documentary about the Shroud of Turin makes a startling new claim about what some believe to be the burial cloth of Jesus. The body was weightless or levitating when it left its remarkable image behind. Scientific experts using latest technology produced a three-dimensional holographic image from photographs of the shroud. What they reveal in these 3D images is nothing short of spectacular. They showed the image is not from a body lying on a stone slab, but rather the image of a weightless body, perhaps levitating above to its resting place. So ever since 1976, there have been three-dimensional reconstructions of the image on the shroud. Now also, you got to remember, as you're looking at this picture, you're seeing the actual contrast-enhanced version on the left. The original shroud is basically just this linen, and it's very light colored. It's only when you make it into a photographic negative using modern photographic techniques that you actually see the Shroud of Turin image that everybody's so familiar with. These scientists, back in 1976, used computer modeling and actually were able to see the three-dimensional imprint as it burned its way into the fabric. Now, a lot of people like to try to bag on the Shroud of Turin, but I don't believe that's warranted. I think this is an authentic relic. It appears that the image is not painted, that it's burned in, and it had to be a very high heat, like 1,000 degrees Celsius. Now, Why these guys say it was levitating is that the shroud has the image of the body on both sides. And the buttocks, if it was resting on the stone slab, the buttocks would normally show that weight by having this more expansive look. You would see it on the thighs, you would see it on the butt, you would see it on the back. The skin would look like it was resting against glass. But that's not what happens. The body on the bottom and the top is above the fabric. You get a three-dimensional burn of the image. So it actually appears this body had levitated off the shroud. Now again, if you only talk about the shroud Turin, there's a lot of controversy there. For example, the only part they were allowed to carbon date was a part from a repair that happened much more recently after it was burned, and you see these little triangles on it. They carbon dated the triangles. Well, of course, the triangles are newer. If you don't date the old part of the shroud, you're not going to know when it's from. So the Shroud of Turin might be hard for people to accept, but once you see that this is happening over and over again in Tibet with the rainbow body phenomenon, the people are shrinking down, well, yeah, maybe the shroud actually does have this levitating image. So I believe what we're really seeing here is a prophecy that is made for all of us. It's a prophecy of our time. It's a prophecy of what we're heading into. Now, since we're almost out of time here, I know we have a class syllabus for what we're doing next, but I don't have any information of that right in front of me. Elizabeth, are you there?
Yeah, I can get it.
Yeah, why don't we get it so that I can, I'll just go through a couple more slides here. William Henry and Dr. Mark Gray also talked about this concept of the light body, showing how widespread it is. And this is one of my favorite things William Henry's done, although there's a lot of great stuff he's done. This one is particularly amazing. In Sufism, oops, there's a spelling error there, just caught that. Sufism calls this body the most sacred body or the super celestial body. Taoists call it the diamond body. People who attain this are called immortals or cloud walkers because they actually do fly. Yogic schools and tantrics call it the divine body. Kriya Yoga calls it the body of bliss. Vedanta calls it the superconductive body, and the ancient Egyptians called it the luminous body or the Karast. This conception evolved into Gnosticism, where it's referred to as the radiant body. In Mithraism, it's called the perfect body. In the Hermetic corpus, they call it the immortal body. In the alchemical tradition, the Emerald Tablet calls it the golden body. So you can see this is a really, really vast area of inquiry. And so now I'm going to read you, thank you, Elizabeth, what we're going to do next time. And this is going to be on February 23rd, live, once again, 4 p.m. Pacific time, once again on a Saturday, why your spiritual path gets blocked. Now we will talk about how the media is blinding you from the truth and how you will transcend the blocks to your own ascension. We will be talking about ascension philosophy, techniques for ascension, and the Ascension Diet. So that's coming up in a week, and we will be here again giving you this live broadcast. I'm really happy about how well this has gone down. But right for now, I just want to leave you with this thought. Some of the prophecies that I gave you sound really heavy. I do not necessarily think that there is any type of physical destruction per se. So many people who have studied this solar flash, we really don't know what it is. It appears to be more of a metaphysical transformation. There is a physical event that takes place. There is some sort of release of energy from the sun. But what's really important is how this activates you as a soul. So my goal is really to try to help you be ready for this, because you may not be ready to believe that this is actually true, but just in case it is, there are practices that these ancient teachings and the modern works like the Law of One tell us will help you to be able to ascend. I do believe also that these tribunals, these mass arrests, and the public awakening that is resulting and will go much farther is a big, big part of this as well, but there is a much greater spiritual context for everything that is going on. So that's it. I'm David Wilcock, and let's see if we can fire off that opening sequence once again to round this thing out. Thanks, everybody. Thank you for watching. We will see you next time. And again, I didn't even know about this Super Chat thing, but you guys have done so much for us in the Super Chat with the donations. That is awesome. Thank you so much for doing that. And again, Do subscribe to our channel. Do hit the bell so that you know that you're going to get this regardless of what happens to us. All right, thanks. This is David Wilcock. We'll see you next time.